this country is at war with Germany.
We had to do a job, and we did the job, and that was it.
The men had to go and fight, and the women had to take their place.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
Hello and welcome back to Foxhole Chat. This week in the Foxhole, we're going to be talking Blitzkrieg.
Yeah, we're going German this week.
We're going German. Yep, back to Germany and back to the beginning of the war. Blitzkrieg as a whole, the British gave it its name in the newspapers, but it was basically the strategic, fast-moving tanks with motorised infantry and artillery supported by dive bombers concentrating in one part of an enemy sector. So let's basically just get everyone and just go for it.
Yeah.
Is that the basic gist of Blitzkrieg?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I found, and that's been my understanding of it. So I found a definition of it: a combined armed surprise attack, which in 1940 definitely was like, we weren't expecting it. I think the Allies were very lackadaisical, especially the French. Sorry to any French listeners, but you can't deny that you lot were just kind of sat around eating your lovely crusty bread, and we didn't see it coming. So yeah, it was definitely took us by surprise.
Certainly did. Blitzkrieg roughly translates to lightning war as well, so it's even got that fast name to it as well. So I read multiple sources. It got multiple answers,
Okay,
which was not helpful.
No,
about where this sort of originated.
Same, yeah.
Leading up to World War II, the strategic was first put forward by Colonel John Fuller, the Chief of Staff of the British Tank Corps. Fuller was disappointed with the way the tanks were being used in the First World War, and then afterwards, they weren't interested. The British Army was not interested, but it was then studied in Germany. And then in 1926, the German army had asked the government to commission all their new tanks and to be able to use them in Blitzkrieg in any future conflicts. Just like I say, they stole our idea.
Yes. I think we're very bad at like dismissing things and no, we know what we're doing. We don't need that. Like, this is the way to go about it. And I think it definitely has its roots in World War One. I found that I read that it was a novel idea to avoid the stalemate of the First World War. Just the trenches and gaining very little ground. It was, what can we do to avoid that? Well, like you say, tanks and mobility is the way to go. I also found that apparently it has origins in the traditional German tactic, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation here, even though I did German at GCSE. But apparently it has origins in the traditional German tactic of Beschwingungskrieg.
Bless you.
Thank you. Because I also read that there was some sources that I read that said that it was kind of from the old Prussian days.
The early 19th century I've got.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a bit confusing to dive into. It was a mix of old tactic and new tactic, but it was interesting to dive into nonetheless.
Certainly was. The Germans actually tested it in 1938 in the Spanish Civil War. So I suppose that's one thing to do, isn't it? Gather everybody and let's just give it a go, shall we?
Yeah, I think the Germans were very, well, in some ways they were very kind of forward thinking with this and wanted to try things out, compared to us, the British and the Allies, where we would rely more on, we've done this has worked in the past, so we'll just stick to this way of thinking.
Do you reckon in 1938, during the Spanish Civil War, do you reckon they'd have known they'd have been going to war a year later? And therefore that's why they were possibly testing it out?
I think so, yeah. I think that there will have been talk in the background for sure. It might have been, yeah, oh, well, we know we want to go to war eventually, so let's test this strategy out now because we've got time. Nobody else is going to see it coming, but we can. I think it was like right place, right time. The Spanish Civil War was right place, right time for the Germans to test it out without anyone thinking too much about it, if that makes sense. Like, oh, it's just part of this war. It's nothing bigger. But the Germans could use those learnings for something that they knew they were planning kind of in the background. I think that's definitely a possibility. Yeah.
But by the time the Spanish Civil War came around, the Germans were basically just ignoring the terms of the Treaty of Versailles because they had new experimental tanks and they called them tractors. So I suppose that's like one way to get around it.
I mean, yeah, because I read about the Versailles Treaty as well, saying it was an importance to Germany because it limited the German army, so they had to, like you're saying, they had to find new ways to get around it. And I guess calling a tank a tractor is one way to go about it. Yeah. I admire the thoughtfulness for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So a light tractor weighed about 10 tons. It carried a 37mm gun. Not sure why you'd need a tractor with a gun, but hey.
It's to get rid of the seagulls and to clear the field beforehand. I think that's what it is.
A heavy tractor was a 20-tonner with 2 turrets, one forward-facing 77mm gun,
good lord,
and one facing the rear carrying a machine gun.
Good lord. So I think that's what it is like the 77mm, that's to plow the field, and then the machine gun in the back just to get any bits you missed, I think.
Yeah, I could go with that. Sounds good.
Dear me. They're industrious little fellows, the Germans, aren't they? They were sneaky.
So they are. Yeah.
I also found, that's funny you should say about the tanks. So I found that apparently, because linking back to the Versailles Treaty, they trained with cardboard versions of panzers because they weren't allowed real ones.
Okay,
apparently,
didn't know that.
Yeah, okay. Apparently, which kind of makes sense. I think because they were still tooling up to build these tanks or tractors, sorry, they were like, well, we've got to be a bit sneaky here, so let's create these, cardboard versions so that we can still train our infantry in the Blitzkrieg tactics. So that when we've got them, they know what they're doing, which kind of makes sense. With the benefit of hindsight, that makes sense, I think.
Well, after the Austrian painter obtained power in 1933, the German government was very open about its tank production, and by the spring of 1934, the German army began developing the Panzer tank. But then over the next few years, they had the Panzer I, the Panzer II, Panzer III, and the Panzer IV.
Yeah. It was just rapid development, but kind of counterpoint, counter argument. I read that apparently only 15% of, I don't know the time frame, but so I don't know what year this is. I don't know if this is end of the war or this time of the war, but only about 15% of the German army was actually mechanized. Which kind of links into jumping ahead and talking about Band of Brothers. It's towards the end of the series, and it's when they're in Austria, and you see a load of the Germans have surrendered. And what's his name? Webster kind of stands up and shouts at them. He's like, "You have horses. Like, what did you expect?" And I think the whole myth of Blitzkrieg is it was all tanks, it was massive columns, but people kind of forget that in the rear they were still using horse-drawn carts to bring up supplies, fuel, ammunition, that sort of thing, and tow the guns sometimes as well, kind of similar to the First World War. So I think that's kind of debunking a little bit of the Blitzkrieg myth, I think.
Well, if a tank runs out of petrol, it's going to stop and you're not going to be able to do anything with it. You're not going to be able to move a 20, 30-ton Tiger tank out the middle of the road. But if a horse runs out of petrol, you can just think, oh, look, there's a nice lush hush bush.
Yeah,
Just here, have a munch while we have
Yep.
some lunch, and we'll carry on.
Now, maybe that was the German army motto: have a munch while we have some lunch, and then we will carry on with our Blitzkrieg. Oh, amazing.
We need to put that on a t-shirt.
Oh, yes,
Oh.
yes. Foxhole
needs to go on
Chats. Have a munch while we have some lunch. Oh, amazing.
Anyway, so obviously Germany had got all these tanks. During the invasion of Poland in September 1939, it became clear that the Panzer I was insufficiently armed for battle conditions. Then the Panzer II and III tanks were reliable but outgunned. So they're doing well so far. The outstanding performer was the Panzer IV, with the perfect combination, apparently, of speed, agility, firepower, and reliability. So then, over the next few years, it became the backbone of Blitzkrieg, and over 9,000 Panzer IVs were produced.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
That's a lot of tanks.
Yeah, and it just goes to show they've gone from cardboard Panzers to making 9,000. I mean, it's still, dwarfs in comparison to the number eventually of tanks that the Allies produce. The Shermans was in the tens of thousands from what I can remember. But at this early stage of the war, they were definitely outproducing, obviously us, the British, because at this point America isn't in the war, so we're relying on our own industry. So those kind of numbers, at this point in the war are significant.
Yeah, but as usual, they're German and very over-engineered.
Yes. Yeah.
Which
is still like some people love, I get the whole mythos behind the Tiger tanks and the Tiger II, but I can't get past the over complexity, and I'm just like, how can you like something that was essentially rubbish and just didn't work half the time, and would be so, it's fine, okay, yeah, it's massive and it could take out a normal Sherman, but I'd rather take a simple Sherman over an overcomplicated Tiger or Tiger II any day of the week. I don't know. It just I don't get when people are like, oh, it's amazing. I'm like, yeah, but is it though? I don't think it is.
Well, the Red Army didn't think it was amazing.
No,
because in 1942 that showed that the Panzer IV was no longer invincible.
Yes.
So
yes, exactly.
Well, the Panther did eventually become the most popular tank in Germany. Some great German commanders that came out of Blitzkrieg. One of them was Erwin Rommel, which we've mentioned on here before.
Wasn't there? Obviously, Rommel is super well known, but is it Michael Whitman? He's another. I might be pronouncing his name wrong.
He's a tank ace, yeah. Michael Whitman, he's a tank ace, yeah.
Yeah, so
he's buried at Le Cam in Normandy.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, literally just look for the little grave marking on the floor where the grass is worn out, because everybody goes. And there'll be some candles and rocks and stuff around his grave as well.
Wow, there we go.
So, a picture will again magically appear on screen of his gravestone through the powers of editing.
Yes, yeah. So the Germans have got their industry sorted out, haven't they? And I think, in terms of looking at the Allies side of it, I think when I was researching this and thinking about it, I think the Allies were kind of overconfident, believing that the terrain and their superior numbers at this point, because what I found was apparently that Germany had 10 divisions versus France had 85 divisions, and at this point in the war, France had the biggest army in the world, and we had a considerable amount of people in France at this point with the BEF. So I think it comes from that. Well, we've got France, who's the biggest army. We've got the Maginot Line. The terrain is perfect. They're not going to come through the Ardennes because you can't get through the Ardennes. We don't need to worry about that. It's fine. Let's just have a jolly on the Maginot Line and we'll be all right. So I think that lackadaisical nature, I don't think that helped. I think that really hindered the Allies at this point.
Yeah, and that was one of the things Hitler relied on as well, was the crushing force of his tank divisions, accompanied by a large number of motorized infantry. And I'm not sure the Brits and the French had it to quite that extent.
No, no. I mean, you had old like Renault tanks left over from the First World War, that sort of thing. But we had, probably barely anything. We didn't have the Churchill, or the Cromwell or anything like that. We were making do with subpar weaponry, as we always do, us Brits. So yeah.
So well as Blitzkrieg on the west, they also tried it in the east. It was Operation Barbarossa
Mm.
in 1941. Germany's mistake of opening a second front. Germany mobile troops were nearly 3 times the number put in the field against France to show the Nazis intended to root out the Red Army with a lightning blow and achieve a rapid victory.
I think that ties into, I mean, that's more at that point, and then later in the war with the Battle of the Bulge and the Hurst Nebel, autumn fog. I think that's the German ideology of they had this success in France with the first Blitzkrieg, and they've gone, oh well, we've done it before, so it'll work again. But just being absolutely blind to see the more overarching picture of the war, of how many men they've lost, how many tanks they've lost, their supply chain and all that sort of thing, all the big war stuff. They just ignore that and go, no, we're the Germans and it's worked for us once, so we'll make it work again. So I think it's that stubbornness that was ultimately their downfall, I think.
Yeah, and it definitely didn't work again. I think Stalingrad, Barbarossa was probably one of Germany's biggest defeats that early in the war anyway. Because the Red Army used various maneuvers to destroy small and large groups of German tanks and motorized troops, and then to cut them off from their infantry units. One group of 300 tanks was destroyed by a coordinated effort by Soviet infantry and artillery.
Yeah.
So it was certainly a one-hit wonder.
It was, yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. Yeah. But actually, it's funny you said that. So I was kind of fast forwarding to modern times. I found a really interesting fact. That the term Blitzkrieg was kind of used sometimes to categorize campaigns after World War II. So I found that apparently Iraq's failed surprise attack against Iran in 1980 was referred to in the press rather ironically as the slowest blitzkrieg of all time. So, all those years later, it's still in like the media, lexicon, and still being brought up. And I think I actually found a lot of people saying that the media's use of the word in 1940 kind of sunk it into the public's perception in their mind of, oh, the Germans have got this blitzkrieg tactic, and how are we going to combat it? So, that probably didn't help. The use of propaganda with their success was a big thing that I found.
Yeah, that's all I've got.
Yeah. I think that's a good mix of us diving into Blitzkrieg there. So we've kind of chewed the cud and kind of dispelled some myths and some nitty gritty numbers on tank production and our take on Blitzkrieg. So yes, we hope you've enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and make sure you stay tuned. We got plenty more in the pipeline to cover the German side and our side, and going through series and films. So, yep, thank you very much once again, and we will catch you in the next one.